Yes. Okay. Let's start. My name is Hannes Rudolph, and I am with RooCode. I am the community manager here, and our special guest is has just arrived. David, welcome.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, and we have Adam, one of our community contributors, also as my co-host, and Matt Rubens. He is our lead dev. He's here to grill you. You've met him before.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Good to see you again.
Okay, so I guess we can start by asking you a few questions. Can you tell us a little bit about Netflix, your role there?
I'm a staff software engineer on the GenAI platform team, so we're building the underlying foundations for all the other teams at Netflix to use GenAI in their products, internal tooling in their as agentic coding, all of that good stuff. So instead of having every single team sort of reinvent the wheel each time, all of the sort of commonalities, or in the like the AWS terminology, undifferentiated heavy lifting, we try consolidate that and figure out a solution that works with everyone so they can focus on problems specific to their team or their domain.
Okay, neat. And you have been, I guess, I feel that you've sort of been our personal champion for Rue. You seem to have taken a liking to it. You guys even put forward a few pull requests, if I recall.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar origin story to what Matt and how Rue even got started. I had made a bunch of pull requests to Klein back in the day, a good few months ago now, and they got sort of closed out or rejected. So I looked at Roo to see if we could get similar functionality, because we have our own version essentially of Open Router. So before Open Router was a thing, we had an Open Router. So we have Open AI compatible endpoint sort of gateway that exposes all models across all providers. So OpenAI and Anthropic and Bedrock and Vertex. So we wanted to be able to configure um, Roo to use those endpoints, or use our endpoint past the whatever API keys are needed, model
Yeah,
configuration, enable prompt caching. Like prompt caching on Bedrock is super tricky to figure out, and every developer, at the time had to do all of this configuration. We had a doc guiding people on how to do it, so they'd just be copying and pasting things from the doc and setting up things. So now with the support of Roo, we actually have a developer environment where all of this is done out of the box, so you don't have to do any configuration. So all of our Open Router equivalent endpoint is configured. All of the models that we support with whichever prompt caching and computer use and all of that are configured, so developers can just start using it versus worry about all of this configuration, which
yeah.
was, yeah, really nice.
Huh, neat. Okay, that's encouraging. We're as we shift to a more uh, to have features that our enterprise customers can use. It's encouraging to see that you guys have really nailed that down. Have you guys been using the settings import to assist with that?
I'm not actually 100% sure which one we did use. Maybe Matt knows more, but it's
Uh-huh.
like a custom VS Code hook. So there's a
Yeah.
VS Code event on when VS Code is launched and Rue is installed, and then we attach to that hook. And when that hook is triggered, we set all of our custom configuration. I'm not sure exactly if it's done via the config import, like you're saying, or if that is actually a newer feature, and we're still using some older feature from like 2 months ago when we did this work.
Matt, could you speak to that?
I know it a little bit more deeply, but the AI's been doing the code review lately. No, I think there's like a confluence of things that happen around the same time. Like you all were pushing a little bit more for the external configuration. So my understanding is that you have like key management, right? That's like separate, and you need some way to get that key management into Rue, right? Have more dynamic configuration. And at the same time, we were also working both on our integration tests as well as our evals. and like all those things at the same time, we actually ended up making a lot of progress on our external API. Where there's like I guess like a set of endpoints that you can use to connect with Roo, which has been really cool. I don't know if you actually saw this, but like around the time that you all helped us get that API open, started saw on Twitter. So I think someone in Japan like created their own command line version of Roo, which is really cool to see. So it's been really fun to see, and maybe you don't even know like the things that you kicked off, but it's just been really exciting to see how like kind of pushing on one side of this can kind of make it jump out in the other direction and then come back. So yeah, really big thanks for helping us advance it. I know that I think there's still a support thread where we're trying to figure out exactly how to support multiple profiles at the same time. But either way, we're a lot farther than we were before you started helping us with this. So yeah, I want to say thank you for that.
Mm. Yeah, great collaboration, great community. We've felt really welcomed, and the support for getting PRs merged is amazing.
Well, we do like to brag that we embrace the community aspect of this process. So some questions coming up here. What IDEs do engineers at Netflix use?
We we have a concept of, I guess, freedom and responsibility at Netflix. So on a sort of a supported path, I think VS Code and IntelliJ would be the top two that if you use those, you can get support for any problems that you might run into. But you're welcome to use whatever editor you want, that makes you most effective at your job. That means, I mean, in terms of agentic coding, so while Roo is the one that we're able to provide the most support for, there's still people that use Aider, Cloud Code, um, Codex. Codex was a little bit tricky when it came out from OpenAI because they only supported the responses API. And actually, I'm really curious to see what OpenRouter is going to do in terms of that. Now that some tools are only supporting that format, but I did see that someone forked Codex, and they might have even merged it back into the main Codex repo to go to support chat completions. So I guess we need to get on top of supporting that tool. But there's a very broad usage of tools at Netflix. If it makes you effective at your job, use it. Is pretty much the attitude.
It sounds like a good place to work, to be honest. I wish Rue was like that. No, they only let me use Rue code. Uh,
I don't know.
so,
All your credit, you give credits to all the tools. You're like everyone's favorite customer, I think, Hennis. Trying like seven of them at the same time.
I do use like 7 every day. Netflix
Yeah.
sponsorship, thanks. What are your that's every time we have one of these, he was touting Google sponsorship last time. Now he's trying to get us sponsored by Netflix. Um, we just like having Netflix on board, but thanks, Dan. Um, do you have a predefined customized set of modes and roles, roles for your engineers, or do they set them up their own? They use out of the box ones.
I think it's still very much early days. Everything is changing so quickly that it's hard to say one way or the other. I know that there are some custom prompts for some of the internal tooling or libraries that are slightly different at Netflix, and like a LLM trained outside of Netflix has no idea about these. So adding that to the prompt is important so that the LLM can be able to make the right sort of HTTP requests with the right signing and that sort of stuff that it wouldn't know to do otherwise. I mean, it can eventually figure it out once it sees the errors, but just shortcutting that whole process. But in terms of, yeah, I think in a 3 months from now, 6 months from now, we probably should be tackling the problem of every engineer having like a slightly different prompt and figuring out which ones are the really good ones that every developer should have automatically injected into their context by default as a sort of like out of the box setup, and which ones are like specific to teams. So I could even imagine like a sort of a drop down or configurable endpoint, almost like a prompt repository. And probably someone's already thought of this idea where teams can upload the prompts that work specifically for their teams and their set of tools, and then when you launch it, you can launch it as a like a predefined profile where it comes with all of your team's best practices, sort of like the VS Code the suggested extension sort of thing when you launch VS Code, and in the repository, it's like this repository works best with these extensions. Maybe that sort of thing. You might even be able to do that actually with checking in some like rules or .RooCode or whatever the that configuration is. But yeah, to answer the question, nothing like that now, but I can see something like that 6 months from now. We're all sort of still exploring the space and figuring out best practices as we go.
Hey, Matt, we have some, we're working on a marketplace with Smartsheet. Is that the kind of thing which will help with that?
Yeah, well, I think when I talk a lot to different, I mean, I talk to a lot of people, or I aspire to, and talking to a lot of companies, it sounds like, yeah, that is something that's been a priority for them. Like, how can they, find the best practices within their company and then kind of curate them up and make it a little bit easier for the people who come next to get a better experience with the tool. I think that's one of the pros and cons of Rue is that it's so customizable and flow so flexible. But I think most of us have kind of realized that you end up in there and your first experience is a little bit of figuring things out. So I do think, especially in the company context, making it a little easier for companies to curate a better experience is definitely something that a marketplace and even now as we start, we had a boomerang orchestrator mode recently, which is awesome. I think our favorite modes kind of make it into the product, but I think pretty quickly with five of them built in, you can imagine a future where we're not going to keep adding more and more default modes in there. Like I think we're going to want some way to install them and remove them and like you said, David, to have like suggested ones based on things that we know about you or your organization. And I think that would come through. Yeah, marketplace is kind of analogous to the VS Code marketplace somehow. So yeah, still trying to figure that out. Really appreciate all the community support and pushing that forward as well. There's some epic thread. I don't know how many messages. Seems like every time I come back to it, there's like 100 new messages in there.
I
But
can't
yeah, a
keep.
lot of
Two
yeah, it's
two
you,
nights.
Adam. It's you. You're doing
Yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. But I want to say something. 2 nights ago,
I think you're
Names
muted.
MT
But would
and
love to hear what you have to say about that.
can you hear me?
I can
Yes,
hear
I
you.
can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I was about to shout out to everyone on that mega thread that Matt just mentioned. Like about 2 nights ago, everyone was up really late, and Names MT and JB and a bunch of other people on that thread basically pumped out a PR that got us UI. It got us installation. We hooked up Names MT is a guy who has already written a thing called RooRocket that literally will take uh, prompts and stuff and auto install them. And it's a
Yeah, I
CLI
was
based.
talking to him this morning
Yeah, and
or
it's
last
amazing.
1 in the morning.
It works, and I've been actively out there trying to recruit other people that have collections like Jez and other people that have collections that we could throw in the marketplace and stuff. But if anyone on the Netflix team has really specific ideas, they can join that thread, PRs, whatever things y'all need. One question I was curious about because it just happened: do y'all use any of the Microsoft MDM to restrict Visual Studio Code? Because now Windows and the Mac have the capability for you guys to do that at a corporate level if y'all want to.
Restricted in what way?
Just be able to control it, like MDM, like a mobile management. I know it as a mobile developer stuff. So basically, you lock down Visual Studio Code, and you only can install certain extensions. You only can connect to certain servers, et cetera, et cetera. Basic IT lockdown procedures.
I know we have a like an internal VS Code marketplace store where you can download like approved Netflix extensions that aren't available on the public marketplace. But I don't think we've gone to the point of restricting anything. I think we rely on a lot of responsibility from developers to vet the extensions that they're installing
No, that's
without having to
yeah.
like go through an approval process of I want to use this extension because it'll make me more productive, and now you've got to go to IT and ask for probably a great use case is just although the VS Code marketplace probably needs this itself anyway is just blocking like obviously malicious ones. But I'm not I don't think we're too concerned about yeah
Yeah, we're
stopping
concerned
people
mainly
installing
about
things.
we're mainly concerned about MCPs more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
That'll
yeah.
probably
Okay,
be the
yeah,
last. Yeah, that'll be
yep.
the last thing. But now that Docker is going to officially have an MCP marketplace, and they got millions of dollars to vet MCPs and stuff. Hopefully we can piggyback on top of them since they're already trusted by, the community for all their containers they provide.
Yep. MCP is a great call out. We're very much thinking about security of MCPs, and MCP has so many ways of installing them now. You can UV run or npx. You can git clone and just run the code. It definitely opens up a lot more threat avenues that hadn't existed before. So great call out in terms of MCPs being available through a trusted vendor to verify their um, authenticity, that they don't contain exploits, that sort of thing. Although it's even hard to define what if an MCP contains an exploit anymore, when they pretty much can just like run bash commands. So that's a pretty scary world sometimes.
Yeah, I guess it is. Restricting to a remote set of MCPs will probably, I'm thinking, where companies will end up. They give you approved ones, and these are the endpoints, and that's that.
Yes.
Okay, so another question. I guess someone was asking here about training models. Are you guys working into training or creating models for in-house purposes, or is that top secret?
I think beyond supervised fine tuning or RLHF, uh, there's no plans for training foundation models from scratch. I think it's not a core competency. It's extremely resource intensive. Well, actually, I guess DeepSeek is showing a little bit otherwise. Well, I guess depending on which story about DeepSeek you read, how much resources they actually used. But the fact that there's open source foundational models to do fine tuning on top of is more than enough for now, I think.
Yeah. That makes complete sense, I guess, recognizing what you guys are good at and doing that repeatedly instead of, splitting your focus. We try to do that, but some days I think we end up doing all sorts of stuff. Are there any specific features that you guys would really like to see in Rue that you have imagined, but haven't really pinged us for because maybe they're a little more than you guys want to uh, contribute at the moment, and you don't want to make too big of an ask, possibly.
I think the the feedback I've been hearing from users who aren't in love with Rue and maybe using other solutions is, I guess, stability. Some users tried boomerang mode and found that like some processes hung or it never returned to the main one, and they had to like hard restart VS Code. But that was from like weeks, a couple of weeks ago, and that's like
Yeah.
ancient history in Rue timescales. uh,
Yes, I
so
guess it
I
is.
think when you scale it to like an engineering organization of whatever it is, 500 to 1,000 developers, even bugs that only occur, very rarely, are like a daily support reach out, and someone might post saying, "Hey, Rue did this," or I tried it with the Gemini model and it just started adding plus signs and pipe signs everywhere. That was actually something that someone complained about. But is it, how do you even solve that? Maybe one thought is, I did see that Rue has evaluations based on models and like coding tests. I saw that somewhere on the website somewhere. Now, I think if we were able to go to our users and make a recommendation about which model they should be using, every time a new model comes out, people jump on it and they try it, and some people are like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen," and some are like, "Oh, well, 3.5 Sonnet V2 is still better." I wonder if there's a way to definitively answer questions like that, and also at the same time sort of prove stability, or prove that when they did see something, it's not like a widespread wide scale problem that came out in the latest release, and maybe it's something. in their code base or some like hidden instruction or something that's tripping up the LLM. That's one thing that I can think of,
Yeah.
um, which is more like
Okay.
a nebulous ask versus a specific ask that we could just make a pull request for.
One thing we are working on um, actively is running releases through a series of tests before releasing them to try to, basically um, eval type tests to see if we can break Rue. One step ahead of implementation tests.
Yep.
Yeah,
We're
we've been spending a lot of time on it. I think you're 100% on base with what you're saying. A lot of this eval stuff is actually enabled by the API work that you all have been doing. So thank you for that. I mean, one problem we've actually been having, like we've been very inspired by Aider on these things. Like they do a great job of it. But because Rue is so agentic, it actually like the evals are pretty easy for Rue to get done, which is pretty cool. But also makes it like a little harder to tell like if you actually broke something. So we're in the process of working on more difficult evals, and also yeah getting something in place to run them automatically on every release or when community members have ideas for. I know a lot of people have ideas for how to improve the system prompt, but just it's so touchy to change that, and if you do it wrong you can get a bunch of feedback that it's probably some of the feedback you mentioned. So yeah, trying to get a process around that that's a little bit more scientific, and also to add more instrumentation around things like diff failures so we know. I mean, if you could pass an eval by getting a diff error, then falling back on write to file and finishing it like that. But to the extent that humans still watch this thing, which I hear people still do, it can be frustrating or expensive if you could see it kind of wrapped around the axle trying to execute tools. Yeah, all this stuff we're really actively working on. I think evals in particular will unlock just a lot more value and a lot more stability for people going forward.
Yeah.
Oh, on that topic, it just reminded me. So one thing that we saw, so we have an OpenAI compatible gateway, like Open Router, and we use the OpenAI compatible mode for Claude Code. Since it didn't support that at all, we exposed the Anthropic compatible endpoint, and a couple of users tried out using the Anthropic endpoint directly instead of going through OpenAI compatible, and it was actually night and day in terms of difference of quality. And that was kind of surprising, and it shook me a little bit in terms of our bet on the OpenAI compatible mode, that the difference was so vast. And that could be from the client implementation. When you're coding against a specific model, your prompt is going to be tuned. You can know about thinking. The tool format is going to be the right format. um, Prompt caching, all of that. You're sort of more guaranteed that it works, versus with OpenAI compatible, you're relying a little bit on hoping that everything is set up correctly for things like thinking and prompt caching to be sure is working. And even if things like thinking isn't working, it's even tricky to figure out that it's not working until it's too late, because maybe the LLM didn't feel like spending tokens on thinking for that one particular question. So I'm definitely curious to see. I've been looking at Open Router, and I at least last time I checked, I didn't see that they had specific endpoints for Anthropic compatibility or Gemini compatibility. But I do know that they do have a significant amount of code in Roo for the Open Router endpoint versus the OpenAI compatibility endpoint. Even though in theory I feel like they should be somewhat similar. So that was one thing that also surprised me, is just going through the provider specific endpoint can actually give like drastically different results. Like for Claude
Interesting.
3.7, people were thinking it was pretty dumb until they tried the Anthropic endpoint, and they're like, okay, wait, actually, this is so much better than going through the OpenAI compatible one.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe we can follow up on that a little bit. The OpenAI compatible is definitely like a kind of a catch-all that I think a lot of companies like you all use in enterprise to like work with the proxies and things. But I've seen some people who didn't realize that we have sane defaults, which are not that great, where it's like 128K context window instead of 200,000 or a million. And I think the thinking might not be supported through there. Yeah, I agree. It's like a good way to get things going, but we do spend a lot of time and a lot of the community effort goes into optimizing the specific providers. So we should talk about whether there's something better we could help you with there to get the full
Yep.
experience.
Okay, we have a guest here. Go ahead. There we go.
Great.
Here he is.
Hey, kind of backing it out a little bit, I had a real broad question. Since your team underpins the agentic development across Netflix teams, lots of technologies, lots of different solutions, I was curious, it sounds like you haven't arrived at any custom root configurations that you're kind of sharing and disseminating. Do you have a set of best practices or advocacy for your teams who want to adopt AI coding for what they should and shouldn't use it for? What tasks work well with it? Have you started to develop any sort of guidelines when it comes to enabling developers to start approaching projects correctly so that they can be, more successful? Because then sometimes, it's great at some tasks, not at others. Got to switch models in order to do UX. Got to go back to, when you start to build a lot of projects, you start to get more used to that ebb and flow of the different models and what it can and can't do. Curious what your thoughts on that is now that you kind of have that view of all the teams.
In terms of centralized guidance for root configurations, we only provide the out of the box setup for endpoints and what models are available and that sort of thing. Yeah, this is such a good question. I think teams have really been relying on their gut and what's worked for them. And a term that I like to use is almost like influencers, developers that other people see, wow, this is a 10x developer, or look how productive she is. And when that person speaks, everyone listens. And when they say, Try this as your prompt," or "I found this tool to be amazing," people around them try to emulate them and like, for example, Steve Yege. I don't know how to say his last name. Steve Yege in the open source community. He's always got these amazing posts on X or whatever about how Claude Code or whatever has changed his life. And like I listen to him, and when he says to try something, I try it. So I think that's probably the model that has happened organically at Netflix, is look at the people who are most effective and try do what they're doing. In terms of what works for like a particular code base, or doing UI versus backend, doing Golang versus Rust versus Python, I think this almost goes back to my earlier ask for Roo, and thanks for linking to the evals page in chat. It's almost like evals are at the core of everything. So I found that you can build a prototype using LLMs amazingly fast if you're interacting with users or solving a problem, and you'll get that up and running and everyone will be amazed. But when you try iterate on it, try changing the prompt, or you're seeing that there's an edge case that it's failing horribly on, and you tweak the prompt, and now some other edge case pops up and the LLM starts failing at that. Evals are at the center of everything, and if you don't have a good set of test cases to know that things are going in the right direction and you're not regressing, then you're almost lost. And at least when you're trying to solve a very specific problem, like customer service, issuing refunds or something like that, your domain is small and you can set up your test cases and you can set up guardrails and whatever. But with the coding cases, it's so broad that you almost want like a team to say, we've tried this prompt for UI for the React framework. Here's a set of test cases and evals, so that if you try a different model, you at least don't want to regress. Or if you change the prompt a little bit, you know that it hasn't gone terribly bad, and you're not relying on. You're almost like, there was a while where everyone was getting gaslit by LLMs when an update would secretly come out, and people are like, "This is garbage. Was it ever good, or did I just my
Yes.
expectations shifted so much?"
Sounds
So
like Reddit.
I so I think the short answer is no, we don't have any guidance, because giving general guidance is incredibly hard. And to solve the problem, I think you need a set of evals and a set of benchmarks for domain specific use cases like you mentioned, so that at least you have a ground truth for changing your prompt or releasing a new release of Roo or going to a different domain. You can verify like that the model is still good, the prompt is still good, and it's probably just because it's a different code base, or your
Yeah.
markdown files containing context and memory aren't as good as the previous repo you were just working on. So yeah, good, great question.
Great answer. Thank you very much. We have another person here. I don't know their name. If you want to introduce yourself.
Rowan. Hi there. Can I ask any sort of question about RooCode here?
Yeah.
Is that all right? All right.
You can ask
So
it, and we have a dev here, or he can answer, or whatever.
I was using it about 6 months ago, and the big problem I noticed with it was that it would eat up so many tokens. And I was wondering, I haven't really been reading all the patch notes and changes, but I was wondering if that still happens. Like the amount of API costs I was getting was like crazy compared to some of the competitors. I was noticing, it was just so expensive and eating up so many tokens for such simple prompts.
Do you want to answer that, Matt, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of layers to answer this question. I think it's certainly possible that there was a bug or that there's like custom instructions or something involved. Like we do really try to make it so we don't waste tokens on things. But on the other hand, I think tokens are really the key to context, and context is the key to results. So my philosophy in building this has always been to give people the option to spend more to get better results. And I think if you compare it to, the work that an engineer does or something like that, even if it's expensive compared to $20 a month, all the engineers I know cost a lot more than that. And making them 20%, 30% more effective is worth it. So I've always optimized for the results. I think if you told me, part of your question is like I'm spending a lot on tokens and it's not helping, like that's not good.
Yeah,
But if it's spending a lot on tokens and you're like getting more out of it, like I just haven't tried to penny pinch so much on tokens, although there are, you might have seen a lot of sliders and settings within Roo where we do try to give
yeah.
people control over time, kind of dialing it back if they know how, and we could do better at the education around it. But yes, I don't mean to minimize your question, but just to share the philosophy behind it. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll chime in. I'll chime in as
Sorry.
well. I think there's a couple practices that we really emphasize will help you out on this front. Switch into architect mode. If you're building something that's like a large feature, really get into architect mode and have a conversation with it.
I get that.
Go ahead.
But like the problem is that I think the way RooCode works, from what I grasp, right, is there's a lot of prompt injection going on. You're feeding the LLMs a lot of prompts already, and I think that's contributing to quite large token usage. From what I noticed, it would I don't know, when I was using it for like 3 months or whatever, it would go through these stages of where it was great. Don't get me wrong, it was great, and it wouldn't use that many tokens, and it was perfect. But then it switched back to just using, as more and more features were added, it switched back to just eating up my tokens, and the cost went like 2-3 times. I think that was just due to the amount of prompts and context being added for such simple prompts. Yes, I switched between the ask mode, the edit mode, I think that was it, and the architect mode. But yeah, I don't know.
We have made
That's all
some
I really have to
significant
say.
leaps around disabling, so that MCP context. You can easily exclude that browser use, the building of room modes, things like that. So the system prompt, I think, actually has come down in size a bit,
That's
but
good.
at the end of the day, the system prompt it goes in on um, your first ask, and after that, it's really just a back and forth, and and plus the environmental variables and such.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that those have to be included, but like looking at other competitors, they still include all the necessary information from what I've grasped, and they don't really use as nearly as much tokens as RooCode tends to use for simple prompts.
I'll say
Yeah.
it's definitely. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is this is also something that we track in our evals as well. Is trying to keep an eye on the spend compared to the results. So it is also something that we, yeah. I mean, I hear you that sometimes either we can inject something, or I saw a case where this is before we added the limit on the number of open tabs that we send. People can have like 700 tabs open and not realize it, and then get charged a lot. So there are edge cases, there are things that go on. But yeah, my hope, I guess, coming back to what David was saying, is that with the evals, we can really kind of get a handle on this stuff and connect the anecdotes to how things are really changing, and make sure that things stay on the rails over time.
Sounds good. One last thing I'll say though, sorry, is that I haven't been using it recently. So stuff like MCPs, that's came out since I've used RooCode. A lot of evals and stuff that you speak of, I haven't actually been able to switch back to it yet because I'm a university student. So just the costs were just too much for me to use RooCode, unfortunately. So with the APIs, like I'd switched to Gemini. I think Gemini 2.0 when that was a thing. That was quite cheap because Claude 3.7 was just too expensive for me. I'm not I'm not an engineer yet. I'm not making 100K a year or whatever yet. So I don't have that money to spend on the API, unfortunately. But I'd love to switch back to RooCode and try it again because I just love the idea of open source and what you guys are doing.
I'll send you 100 Rubucks after this, so you can
Thanks so
play
much.
with it and see
Thank
how
you.
it works.
I'll just also
do that.
recommend, if you haven't tried it, we recently released the orchestrator mode, and the orchestrator mode can bring things down quite a bit because it passes off context from one mode to the other, and kind of does like a summarization. So definitely try the orchestrator if you haven't yet. And then the other thing I was going to say is we recently released caching. So caching, I think, is not perfect just yet, but that should reduce your token usage quite a bit. It's on our radar. It's something we're working on. It's never going to be perfect, but do what you can.
Okay, we have another person here on the mic. Go ahead.
So, how has adoption and uptake of LLMs been at Netflix, and what programs could I institute or repeat within my own organization? Right now, we have about 1/3 of employees as monthly active users of any sort of LLM. Has there been any programs or ways that, or I guess events or something at Netflix to help increase LLM adoption?
Are you talking
Rue
about
specific or not?
Are you talking about developers or all employees at any role?
All employees. Developers for us would probably be around 25% uptake.
Okay. I'd say the developers in Netflix are probably different from the average developers. We're probably I would have to guess close to 100% uptake in terms of developers. Netflix is known for having a very, very high hiring bar for people who are excited and innovators and willing to experiment and try out new things. So that's obviously an advantage that that tips the scale a little bit. Let's see. So I think one thing initially, this has been an evolution over 2.5 years, I guess, maybe even close to 3 years at this point. We didn't have our own open router, so actually using LLMs meant that people had to get tokens for OpenAI and API keys and manage them themselves, and there was a lot of risk there. Creating different OpenAI orgs and projects to manage the bills, all of that introduced friction. So a centralized place for people can call LLMs within your company in a safe and secure manner, so that you can audit it and have legal and security on board with the risk, and have an understanding of what data is being sent to and from and what the use cases are. That's a big step in increasing trust in LLMs across the company and having the company buy into using it in more and more cases. So that was one major hurdle that we had to get over in the very early days. For non-technical employees, we similar problems to use ChatGPT. There was also data storage, like we have for enterprises, you can get a 0 data retention agreement with OpenAI and all of the other providers so that they're not training on your chats. So before that was available through ChatGPT Enterprise, and even some features are still not available, like assistants and agents. They store data on their backend just because of the nature of the feature. To use threads and to use conversation history, they have, like, OpenAI has to store something somewhere. So we built our own version of ChatGPT internally, so a site that users can go to and have the normal ChatGPT experience, but with all of the guarantees about data retention and privacy and security. So that was another hurdle that was overcome and allowed people to be more comfortable with it. That let us also inject custom prompts and context so that it became more useful to users without relying on the external providers having to have access to Google Docs and so on. But the landscape has probably changed a little bit there. Okay, so those are some like yeah, minimum things that you have to do. Trainings, we have enough resources at Netflix to organize training for people. Oh, okay, one thing that was a major influence was we have monthly um, get-togethers at the company where people can demo what they've built, share lessons learned, and that usually has like a 200 or 300 engineer audience every month, and that's been super valuable for sharing what's new. Like Rue was presented at one of that. Actually, this was probably might have been in like December or something. That was the first time I saw someone do a demo of I don't know if it was Klein or Rue at the time, but like that was a really great demo. It got me interested, and it went from there. How's that for answering your question so far? Any
It
specifics?
the monthly update or showcase sounds like a good idea. We tried a hackathon and well, not much happened. So it was a little scary where we had more awards than participants.
Yeah, yeah. You do need people to come in with problems that they want to solve and that they're motivated to solve, as opposed to just coming in with no ideas. You can try a focused hackathon, solve this problem at the company, and have a award for the most innovative approach or closest to the solution, or even award for like someone that came up with evals. That should be its own award category. You didn't actually get anything working, but you came up with a good set of evals to know if it's working or not.
I'll have to try
Uh,
that. Thank you.
Oh, one last thought. So at our team, one of our teams get-togethers, we next time we meet, we're evaluating agent frameworks, SDKs, LangGraph, whatever. And one of the problems we're just using as a toy problem to solve is if you've heard of this board game called Codenames, wait, shoot, is it Code Words or Codenames? Someone help me out here. So it's a really fun party game, and we're basically gonna pit two agents against each other. So it's like you have to guess the words. You have to communicate words to the other people
Names.
on the other side of the table. Yeah, code
Yes.
names. So anyway, we're
So
gonna have agents play that against each other. So no humans allowed to play it. You have to code up an agent, and then your agent will play against the other player's agent, and we'll see
interesting.
who wins. And that's our way of like drumming up some interest around a hackathon and getting people to evaluate different agent frameworks.
Okay, thank you for your
I
question.
guess
We have
one
another.
follow-up.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Go ahead. I
I'm
cut you off.
spending it. Sorry, I'm spending about 1.5 to 1.2 to 2.1 billion tokens a month. How does that compare broadly to a Netflix engineer or a Netflix consumer?
I won't go into token counts. I
Okay.
think, yeah, maybe someone else has an estimate. I know that Rue just passed 50 billion per day. Is it
Day.
on OpenRouter? Yeah.
Yeah, between 30 and 60, I think we've been.
So maybe you
Yeah,
can
lately.
extrapolate from that what an average user might be using.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
Ryan, have you on board?
Oh, thanks for being here with us today. You already covered part of my question. I was very curious about the security policies around people using ChatGPT and potentially like copying and pasting secure like tokens into ChatGPT that I mean, not likely, but possibly a future hacker could get a hold of. Um, but I was really curious about like when DeepSeek came out, did Netflix send out some sort of message to the developers saying, "Hey, maybe don't connect directly to the DeepSeek that sends the information over to the Chinese servers for security purposes, like because you might accidentally send like information that could be used for malicious purpose." Oh, is there any sort of lockdown like that for models like that come from China that maybe are a little bit less secure for whatever reason? Like, is there any sort of Netflix policy in place around them?
It's almost the other way around. We won't use a model unless we're confident that we can audit it and apply our security policies. So it's not specifically for any models from China or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
um, if you're using an API provided LLM, we want to have agreements with the provider in place already ahead of time. So with OpenAI, it's zero data retention. With Bedrock on AWS, we already have our existing agreements with Vertex, and on GCP, we have agreements. For DeepSeek, we were able to, since the weights are open, we were able to host our own version of it on Bedrock, and now we've deprecated that because it's an officially supported foundational model on AWS Bedrock. So we just use that, and we rely on our existing agreements with AWS. For
Okay. Okay.
our open router equivalent, we log all of the inputs and outputs, so we're able to audit anything that was sent in case of a breach. So that's an important guardrail that we have.
Okay. Okay. That's really interesting. Thanks for answering that. One other quick question. So that means you guys don't pay for your own token usage, right? It's all paid for by the company through these API providers that you have
Yes.
licenses with. Okay.
Yeah, correct. We obviously track the counts, and we can show each user how much they are spending.
Okay. Nice. So when Gemini, sorry, one really quick question, then I'll be done. So when, for instance, Google Gemini releases 2.5 Pro experimental, um, since they, I think part of the agreement is they like say, hey, we're going to use your data to train Netflix developers like yourself can't use that until it's vetted and there's something in place to use it in your company. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
And
Thanks.
to be honest, we've kind of struggled with some of the Gemini models because their out of the box rate limits are so low. I don't really know how they're supposed to scale at a company like Netflix. I think it was 20
Okay.
requests per day at one point, and then now I think it's 20 requests per minute. But with like an OpenAI model at launch, it's like for us it's 30,000 requests per minute as the out of the box defaults.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Adam, do you have a question you have unmuted?
I just wanted to do something since we have the whole community here. Soon, I would like to start trying to have, to tackle on to what Dan was talking about. I want to start having developer days here in the community. I want to use this thing. I want to start trying to onboard new developers. We have, we basically expect people to come in knowing TypeScript, knowing how to use Git, everything like that. And I would like to use it too to show off. We have a lot of really cool people here that have really cool Roo products that, would help people. I didn't want to talk about it directly, Bill, but Dan here, I think, has the best, ultimate, cheapest orchestrator setup I've probably ever seen.
Yeah.
And he actively works on it and does it, and it would be just really cool to show it off to everybody. But like I said, I want to try to onboard more people. I've taken a habit now of when literally this morning, 2 people asked questions, and it was answered by, hey, there's a PR out there. Here's the PR. Here's the GH command to go grab it quickly and run it. And one person actually did it and is helping test one of the PRs right now. So, I want to encourage more of that inside the community and stuff. So I think a developer day every week would be kind of something cool to have. And if anyone would like to do that, DM me and let me know.
That's a great idea. Thanks for bringing that up. Because yeah, we do want to encourage people to continue to build Roo. I like to say that we are for the community by the community, and we do live by those words. We spend a lot of time reviewing the PRs that come in, and quite frankly, we could use some assistance in reviewing them as well. If people are on our our repo and just check out the PRs and do a review, and it will be paid attention to. You can write your input right there. But
My
yeah, let's
catchphrase is
talk more
going to
about that after, Adam.
my catchphrase is going to be client.ts and client provider.ts is a really big elephant, and no one has to eat them alone.
Well, here we have another question from somebody. They just joined us. I don't know their name. I
Hello,
see their
my name's
screen name, but
Mahadi.
oh,
Do you hear
same this
me?
time. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, this is my question. It's basically open-ended, like anyone can answer. I'm just personally curious about this. So I'm a full-on vibe coder, really. I started like building my own app using AI and Roo. I started with Lovable
Yeah.
actually just like 2 months ago because I come from a science background, so this is like all completely new to me. So my question is, like, what should you learn today? Should you learn development? Should you learn AI? There's an opportunity cost to everything. So if you're someone who just has an idea and want to bring that idea to life, what should you prioritize learning?
That's a
I
really,
hope
really
my
good
question is,
question.
yeah, clear.
Yeah, I
I've
think
got
it's
an answer
clear.
for this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so like time management. Seriously, just time management. Figuring out like how to set out your schedule each day and what you're going to work on. Prioritizing. Figuring out what like you said, there's an opportunity cost for everything. What do you do when you can produce anything? There's still a cost. That cost is you have to dedicate your time. You can just do things 10 times faster, 50 times faster. So you need to figure out what works for you. That schedule of for some people, it's every morning, 8 a.m. I know a guy who just 8 a.m. He makes himself a coffee. He sits at his desk. His laptop is shut off, and he just writes down what he has to do each day and prioritizes. I think that is going to be the technical expertise is important, but you are now a producer. You are now a director, and you are now thinking about what is your time budget. What is your like? How are you actually using your time? And I think that's the most important thing.
Mm,
Well,
interesting.
my answer around w- I think that learning the logic of the code you're working with is very key. Being able to write it, no, but being able to read it, very important. You meet people where they grew up in a household where a second language was spoken and they cannot speak it, but they understand it. Um,
Mm,
and that paradigm, I think, is important to apply to this because being able to understand when the vibe coder that Root turns into is screwing up is how you don't end up trying to fix something for 3 days and then throwing it out. Um, that is number one. I've toiled and kept pressing okay, and then fine, okay, I got to look into this and look into it. And it's like, oh, that it's just that, it's some
yeah.
roadblock right in the middle of the three files that it keeps looping through. Often it's comments, by the way.
Yeah,
They
I've
really
been
get
through
in the
that
way.
as well. It's like I'm not even a developer, and somehow I managed to like understand what the problem was when like this most advanced state-of-the-art LLM couldn't do it, because it's like such a simple problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, does anyone else have any ideas too? Because if not, then I would ask a follow-up question to you. Hannes, is that how you say it?
Hannes, yes.
Hannes. Okay, I'm Swedish, so we would say it like Hannes. So I didn't know how to
Yes.
say it. But so you said like understand the logic of the code or be able to read the code rather than be able to write the code. What would you need to learn then to be able to read the code? Like, wouldn't you automatically also know how to write the code if you can read it?
You would think so, but I think oftentimes when you're reading it, your memory will bog. Oh, yes, that's what that does. That's how that works. But if you just sat down with a blank document, being able to construct and write it, being proficient at writing it, are not they overlap, but by no means do they are they the same. If you can write it, you can for sure read it. If you can read it, you can sort of write it.
Mm,
I mean,
Yeah,
you can edit it.
I would say if you're actually concerned about code, um, I would suggest what some people might consider, some real programmers might consider uh, elementary texts on coding. So really approachable ones like the Land of Lisp, the Realm of Racket, Learn Yourself a Haskell for Great Good. Those don't have really jokey names and stuff, but they take an approach of this person doesn't know how to program. I'm going to teach them thing. You may, as a scientist, you might, or a mathematician, you might already know some of this stuff about logic and things like that. But knowing how variables are and all the different other weird things in computer science that you need to learn, books like that will teach you in a very approachable way. Another one I really like is called Closure for the Brave and True, which is another language basically and stuff. But they're not the mainstream languages that people might, throw at you, like Python and JavaScript and TypeScript and stuff. So,
David, do you have any insight into this? You've probably seen a lot of
yeah.
people start out.
Uh, Not a lot of people start out that weren't already top developers. And yeah, I'm I was at AWS for 10 years before Netflix, 4 years, so I've
Oh,
got
wow.
a long career as well. So it's a really good question. It's hard to think back. I think curiosity, staying curious, always asking why something is the way it is, as opposed to just accepting it and moving on. Attention to detail is very important when something's not working. Being able to deep dive and understand it. And honestly, I'm not even sure how relevant. I think they're broadly relevant, but it's hard to say. I think one thing for sure is that the world is always changing, so you have to be able to adapt. So vibe coding is going to look different a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So if you get locked in or stuck in one way of doing things, I know it's going to be different. So you have to be able to change. Um, there's so much there's there's so much value in sometimes just banging your head against the wall for hours and days on a problem and really understanding, going down to the bottom of the stack on how something works. And that's where curiosity comes in. And when you go through a problem like that, you don't forget it, and that's experience that you can't get any other way. The last thought
Yeah.
is sort of scientific or mathematical thinking is it seemed to help me in my career. I've seen cases where a developer writes a bunch of tests and they pass and they're happy, and I've gone in later and I've basically changed all the code, deleted half of it, and the tests still pass. And instead of saying, "Oh, okay, this is great. The tests are passing. It must work." I was like, that's kind of surprising that none of the tests failed after I did such a massive refactor." And it turned out the tests never failed. They never failed. So things like unless you've seen the test fail at least once, you can't trust that that test is actually doing anything. So I think experience like that, curiosity, questioning, attention to detail, because this can happen all the time with LLMs. They're going to tell you, yes, this is working, whatever. And sure, you can try out your app, but I think to see if it actually is working. But I think once you scale past a certain point, or if you come back to an app 6 months or a year after you vibe coded it, how is it ever going to be working again? I think we're going to see a lot of that actually over the coming year, where people have launched businesses or created apps all through LLMs without truly understanding what's going on, and then coming back and saying, "Oh, I'm completely in 100% tech debt. I've literally no way of knowing how to move forward anymore."
That makes sense. Thank you very much for answering that. And I am we've hit our hour mark. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm going
Thanks
to
for
look
answering
into
my
this.
question, by the way.
I'm going to look into this developer days, and I'm not sure who we have set up for next week yet, but thank you all for joining us, and thank you very much, David. We
Thanks
really
for having me. This
appreciate
is
it.
yeah, this is super super exciting. Yeah, love to interact with the Roo community.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.